So some engineers follow code of conduct, but it doesn't mean they're virtuous engineers. So the whole intention is to strive to be a better person.
It's the health and safety professionals out there that are stuck with these choices.
Yeah.
What are the biggest challenges that they are facing now? You mentioned that maybe the manager is asking you to do
Yeah.
something, but what are these challenges?
I believe that education and policy can inculcate reform. If we're trying to change it at this level, it's not going to help. And by improving policy, we can then inform decision makers, which then inform employees, which becomes law.
Welcome back to My Safety Hub. We are still at the Saiosh conference for 2025, and we are now joined by Yaseen Francis, the technical director at ComPrac Holdings. Yaseen, welcome.
Thank you.
And well done on your presentation today as well.
you.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I want to start off by asking you a couple of questions based on your presentation, obviously for the audience's sake that wasn't here today. What is cosmic compassion? What are you referring to when you speak about that?
So, cosmic compassion, if we look at the word cosmos, comes from the word cosmic comes from the word cosmos, which is a Greek word for the universe. And then compassion is obviously a deep empathy that we need to apply as human beings. So if you put the words together, cosmic compassion is compassion that we need to have, not only for our fellow workers, but a universal approach. So that's sort of where I dubbed the saying. And as I mentioned in the presentation, it came as I stumbled up, across a podcast, and I was like, I really like this word, and this is going to help me translate ethics in layman's terms, but also to bring the human side of things beyond just rule-based ethics, code of conducts, but to bring it from a virtuous or noble side of things. Yeah.
So how do you balance this approach of cosmic compassion or holistic compassion with professional ethics?
Okay. So I believe that as human beings, we have an intrinsic, shared values as human beings. Obviously, this has evolved over time due to social settings, cultural beliefs. But as human beings, considered based on teachings, we have this fellow care for our fellow human being. And when we conduct ourselves in the workplace or even outside of the workplace, and that's why I call it cosmic compassion, whether we cross seas or borders, we need to still apply this universal approach. So when you're speaking to a waitress at a restaurant, when you're dealing with a taxi driver, when you're dealing with your kids at home, that you apply this universal approach, cosmic compassion. And I thought about it, why not translate this into the workplace? Because most of the time, we tend to forget that it's all, work, that's the status quo. So I thought, and ethics is very rule-based, you shall not do this or you should do this. But by applying a human element, just having a bit of empathy, I believe that it translates into better ethics. So it's ethics with intention. It's not just rules that you're following, but it's more coming from a virtuous point of view. It's intrinsically ingrained in you. So whether or not the rules existed, you as a noble person, as a professional, you would relay yourself in that manner. So that's how I translate it into what ethics is. And I feel that it has been lost over time in society. And it's about time that there's ethical reform, because there's many reports that's released about this is what went wrong and this is what you should have done. And I believe the fundamental principle starts with ethics, and it starts at the rudimentary level, our upbringing. And if we continue with that, it should translate into the workplace. Now, if you look at engineers now, there's very short form courses on ethics, but there's no way of translating this into tangible actions. And now the emphasis is actually on ethics. Before you as an engineer, before you as a doctor, you spend significant time on ethics. So when you apply it in the workplace, it is an embedded value. It's similar to culture. It's not just a once-off thing. It's a continuous, repetitive nature that eventually becomes a habit. So when someone asks me, for example, I have a specific dietary requirement, I do not deviate from the requirement because someone is watching. I stick to my values is because it's been ingrained in me systematically, but it's what I believe as a virtuous person to be. And that's how I thought, let's translate this noble traits into application, because where is the disconnect?
Okay, so I need to balance this for myself now, right? Because you said a couple of things now which I find very interesting. So from an ethical point of view, we say that, well, ethics, has a lot of rules, a lot of guidelines, do, don't do, you shall or you shall not.
Yeah.
So ethically speaking, because of the rules and the framework within which I need to operate and act as a safety professional or individual in the community, I may or may not be compassionate towards others.
Yeah.
Is that what we're saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the rules can create a sense of compassion
Yeah.
because of my own sense of self-worth or self-dignity that I may have. I may decide to actually abide by those rules or commandments or whatever the framework
Yeah.
may be or not.
Yeah.
Is that what we're saying?
That's what we're saying. Because the issue is, it's easy to follow rules, right? But rules in application is an issue because it's not as simple as black and white. As in my presentation, you get into a situation and it's a complex situation. You're a young engineer, you're a safety professional. Your code says X, Y, and Z, but your boss is telling you to do, 1, 2, 3. And somehow you feel that it's wrong, but you've been instructed to do so.
Okay.
And then your code of conduct is there, but it's easy to deviate from that. But the common denominator is the ethics that's ingrained within you. So whether or not the code exists or not, it's the continuous embodiment of virtuous, traits that makes you a better engineer. So some engineers follow code of conduct, but it doesn't mean they're virtuous engineers. So the whole intention is to strive to be a better person, not just to follow rules, but what does my actions have, not on my fellow workers, but the greater community at large, the environment. So when I design a building, am I keeping the environment in mind? Am I keeping future generations in mind? And what I find engineers are focused on the end product is the building, but not how this building will be demolished 10 years later, how
Right.
it will serve the greater community. And that's what I'm trying to sort of encapsulate, that when we think of our ethics, we think of it as something to be proud of and not something that we need to follow a rule. Yeah.
Okay, so there's an interplay between the set of rules
Yeah.
and the individual
Yeah.
and whether they have ingrained in them
Yeah.
due to historic experiences, their upbringing, their culture, their belief systems,
Yeah.
that they would apply these
Yes.
rules or not,
Yeah.
and for what reason they would be
Yeah.
applying these rules
Yeah.
or not. Great. So for the individuals, the health and safety professionals out there that are stuck with these choices,
Yeah.
what are the biggest challenges that they are facing now? You mentioned that maybe the manager is asking you to do
Yeah.
something, but what are these challenges?
So there's a number of challenges, one of which is a conflict of interest where your company's guidelines or what the client or your employer wants conflicts with your code of conduct. That's a big dilemma. And an example of this is that you in possession of sensitive information, but this information has an impact on the public at large. But due to your limitations by your employer, you can't share it. As a safety practitioner, as I mentioned, there's an injury on duty, and most companies are driven by injury statistics that impacts leaders' bonuses. Now, you have an injury on duty, you're forced to compromise your ethical principles so that it doesn't read as a lost time injury. Now you're stuck in a dilemma, are you going to be disciplined? Are you going to be bullied? Are you going to be victimized? Are you going to be the, non-people pleaser, the non-favorite, the one that doesn't follow rules? Because these people tend to be isolated if they don't follow rules in the workplace. But the intention is that as a safety professional, you have a higher duty towards the public and workers.
Okay.
So regardless of your employment contract and what the state says and, the implications that comes with that, by deciding to be a safety professional as you would as a medical profession, it's almost as if you take a higher oath to serve the public. So whether or not you're on a construction site or you're in the street, your fundamental premise is a duty toward the public and your fellow worker. And that is your guiding principle wherever you are, wherever you may go. And this is one mechanism on how safety professionals can navigate these dilemmas. I, as a safety professional and a client representative, I'm faced with ethical dilemmas all the time. Clients ask me to do some of the most bizarre things. And the guiding principle is I'm willing to walk away because I'm not willing to compromise my ethics because I have a bigger duty. So it's again that embodiment of virtue ethics beyond my employment that drives who I am as a person. And it hasn't been to my detriment because over time people respect virtue ethics. You come across as a person with integrity, and credibility in health and safety is everything. Trustworthy is everything. So minus the challenges, by displaying virtue ethics, you sort of create a motion of credibility and trust, and that's who you want to work for, and that's who you want to essentially be as a person.
Okay, so I'm going to make a statement, and it may or may not be controversial, but I agree.
Yeah.
I think that being virtuous and doing the right thing when no one's looking is, a basic part of humanity.
Yeah.
It's what makes us who we are, and I feel that everybody should act that way as well. But it's not that simple,
Yeah.
though. If we're stuck, in a situation where finding a job is hard,
Yeah.
you may or may not have a family that you need to provide
Yeah.
for. Now you are virtuous, or
Yeah.
you need to be virtuous in different
Yeah.
contexts for different
Yeah.
reasons. So I may or may not report the issue to the powers
Yeah.
that be, and in that process, I may lose my
Yeah.
job. So what about my family?
Yeah. Yeah.
So my
That's a-
question is, what kind of support mechanisms are there for health and safety professionals to do the right thing, and at the same time be protected?
Yeah. That's a very, very good question. And it's a common dilemma that safety professionals and engineers alike face on a daily basis. As in my presentation, I believe beyond a code of conduct, and that's why I recommended that HR practitioners and safety professionals relook at their code of conduct and make sure that the code of conduct within their workplace is aligned to the code of ethics. Because you find that if you work for an engineering firm or a safety consultancy and your workplace code of conduct is not aligned to your professional ethics, then you're already going to have a conflict. And the same as if you're working in an African context and you work abroad, or if you work abroad and you're coming into African context, your code of conduct might not be aligned to global ethics. For example, if you go to China, it's customary to receive gifts, and that might be considered ethical. But because due to the limitations of your code of conduct, you're unable to navigate around that. And the recommendation is there that we reassess our code of conduct, that we find what I call a creative middle way, line drawing. And there's a set of tools that you can apply as a guiding principle in addition to your code of ethics that is sort of ingrained in your company policy. So, for example, receiving a gift, there's a legend and a parameter of what's considered an acceptable gift and what's not. Reporting or underreporting, what's considered acceptable and what's considered, not acceptable. So these are the type of mechanisms from an embodied culture if an organization is truly, dedicated to ethics. If it's, just on surface, then they're not really dedicated to ethics. So it starts on top. It starts with leadership. Beyond that, in South Africa and in many countries, there's not a lot of protection for whistleblowers. As you know, I mentioned in my example, Edward Snowden. Is he a hero? Is he a traitor? We don't know.
Which is why I'm asking the question.
But he's
I
not.
mean,
But he's
so-
not.
so
He's
what
not
do we do?
protected. He's not protected. I think the only way we can address this is at parastatal level, at government level, through policy. I believe that education and policy can inculcate reform. If we're trying to change it at this level, it's not going to help. And by improving policy, we can then inform decision makers, which then inform employers, which becomes law. So it takes safety professionals like myself to look at the real world issues, to be on the ground and say, these are the issues that we face. This code of conduct is not necessarily practical in a sense, and then to advise your government stakeholders that these are the dilemmas that people face, set the specific guidelines, the protection of whistleblowers at that level, and then enforce that at the organizational level, because it has been gazetted. So I believe through policy making, a lot of change can come. We've seen these changes with the regulations from a construction point of view, but there's a lot of practicality issues as well in application. But through, engaging subject matter experts like myself, to engage government that it's not, done from a office point of view, but it's done from a worker and a human element perspective. And through that policy, we can have tangible change. I have this saying, it's the difference between work imagined in an office versus work being done. I can write policies, procedures in the office, but I'm not at ground level to understand. So in a society, as a government, if we don't understand the frustrations at, middle class level, low class level, how are we writing policies? So that's where the disconnect is. And I think through, I call it radical policy reform within an African context, because we face with other issues that you don't find in a European context. So the standardized solutions that they apply is not applicable to us. For example, the construction mafia, certain companies are required to pay protection money. So, how do you do this? So there needs to be specific guidelines, and it can only take place through policy and a radical policy reform within an African context.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've now looked at the balance between being ethical and virtuous, doing the right thing at the right time as well. From a professional registration and certification point of view, health and safety professionals. You can get registered with Saiosh, IOSH, SACP, CMP. You know, there's a number of organizations that you can get registered with. And with that, obviously, there would obviously be a number of certificates that maybe you would have to obtain.
Yes.
A degree or two. I mean, and then there's an oath that you have to take, or possibly have to take as well. Do you believe that these really assist with creating ethical behavior from a professional standpoint?
Yep. At this stage, you know, I'm registered with SARS as a chartered member. I'm registered with the SACPCMB as a professional. You know, I'm well versed in the built environment in terms of my stakeholder engagements. And as far as I know, the only prerequisite or registration body that really, you know, enforces or implements ethics is SAO, which is your professional body for occupational hygienists. And before you reach certain levels as a registered occupational hygienist, there's ethical training
Right.
that you should do. It's mandatory.
Okay.
And it's real life case studies. So it gives typical scenarios of what you as a safety professional would face. And you go through this test and you give your plug of ethics. And I think that does have an implication because it sort of prepares you to a certain degree, not fully, but it serves as a constant reminder of what it should be. Now, in terms of the oath, the code of conduct is there, but we don't actually take an oath. And I think that's a great idea because doctors take an oath. And I think admitted attorneys take an oath. So why not safety professionals and lawyers, you know, take an oath to say, I
Yes.
pledge to do this. And I think in a way it can embody virtue ethics because I believe, I mean, I have kids and I look at my son, he follows my every move. So if the engineers now and the safety professionals now, you know, take an oath and they display virtuous ethics, the generations to come will follow.
Yes.
I know it seems like it's in the air, but I think just displaying virtuous ethics
Exactly.
is it's effective and and you sort of catch on to it over time. Yeah.
Well, maybe that's an idea that we can.
It's a good
we
idea.
Can get going
Before
with.
you register as a professional, take an oath. I think it's a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
I would feel more, you know, I would feel that I have a bigger duty towards the public. I have a lot of classmates that's in the state and they are, you know, ex-military and how they are patriots for the country. It's commendable. And it's because of that oath that they take and you
Yes.
can't take that away. So no matter the issues that they face, they still believe that they're a patriot and it's for the country and it's a good thing to see. So if you embody that same approach, I believe it can be, you know, a nice change within the industry.
Well, it's the why, right?
Yes.
It's why you get
Yeah.
up in the morning,
Yeah.
ultimately.
Yeah.
I've got one more question
Yeah.
for you before I let you go. What guidance will you offer to health and safety practitioners who may face pressure or resistance from management where they actually want to implement ethical practices in the workplace?
It's a tough one. I think it starts with just, you know, downloading your code of conduct, firstly, understanding it, what it means, you know, and, you know, really trying to embody, you know, what does this actually mean and how does this apply into my workplace? Because you can ask a lot of safety professionals, have you read your code of conduct? They've not. So I think that's a starting premise because even before I did ethics as a module at university and through you know my studies, I didn't really think that it was that important. I didn't realize the true benefits of it. And then when I did the ethics class in the module and I read the code of conduct and I was like, wow, this is amazing. We have a bigger duty. And I would say display it as a block, make your employees aware of it. I think that's a starting principle. And as far as navigating the challenges, like I said, there's no one-way solution. But I think the common denominator is a reminder that we have a duty towards the public. And there's one thing that we call in professional ethics, it's called professional judgment. Because you register as a professional, because you've done the training, a rule is not going to guide you, but professional judgment is your intrinsic idea of what is right and wrong, and that should be your guiding principle. And when you apply professional judgment in a court of law, they'll ask you, have you applied professional judgment? Because based on your training, experience, education, you've been assessed as competent, and because you hold a professional status, you should be able to apply sound reasoning
Right.
and professional judgment. That's how I would say. And I think you need to sensitize people to ethics. Like I did, don't take the rules-based approach. People tend to shift away from rules, but make them understand the well-being elements. You know, that's why I use the example of a sheep and evoking cosmic compassion. I thought, how do I relay ethics? And by relaying it in this manner, you're able to touch your leaders in a different way. But that's if leaders are receptible to a cultural change and ethical reform. And also you make them see the benefits of ethics. Ethics can save a company a lot of money, a lot of production, because you're making sure that people avoid unethical behavior,
Right.
which is a big issue that a lot of companies sit with.
Yeah.
And I think if that's embodied over time, it becomes culture, and then it becomes reform. So you have less and less issues that companies face over time. Yeah.
I also think it's, just a realization that if you're ever going to put out your hand to change something, you've got to realize that your hand's going to get slapped.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every now and then someone's going to slap it.
Yeah.
So not everybody's going to take your
Yeah.
hand.
Yeah.
So being resilient, I suppose,
Yes.
adds on to being
Yeah, no,
virtuous as well.
definitely.
And if you fail, you try again.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we're working with people's lives, literally.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, if you look at to conclude, if you look at the Oceana, submarine issue, that engineer, sent multiple reports. He did what he can. He was victimized. But at the end of the day, he did what was humanly possible on his side. And he reported it to the best of his degree, but still navigating around his employment contract. But he never let go of his ethics. So,
Right.
your boss might say no, whatever, but at least you've informed him. You've made him aware, and you've served as a reminder. And I think that's what professionals are. We're not enforcers, but we more oversight. I remind you of what your duties are, and I'm here to serve and protect.
Yaseen, thank you very much for your time. It was good to meet you.
Thank you.
And again, thank you for your contribution here at the conference
Thank you.
as well. Thanks.
Cheers.